creativity is such an incredibly wasteful process. And actually Christians want to de-risk everything. And yet some of the greatest comedians and the greatest writers, they eventually get their show on, we watch the pilot and, oh, wow, this stinks. How could nobody see ahead of time that this wasn't going to work? And they didn't. It's a very, very risky process. And so Christians more than anyone should be prepared to take those risks. Failure is certain. Success is the outlier.
You are listening to the Act One podcast. I'm your host, James Duke. Thank you for tuning in to our little podcast that can, all three of you. If you enjoy what you hear, you can support us by subscribing to our podcast. You can review our podcast. You could even share our podcast with a fourth person. My guest for this episode is British screenwriter James Cary. James is the co-creator and co-writer of the BBC comedy Bluestone 42. His other TV credits include Miranda, My Hero, and My Family, as well as co-writing several series with comedian Milton Jones. James has also script edited and written for a number of other British comedy series, including Concrete Cow, Recorded for Training Purposes, Bridget and Iman, and Citizen Khan. James is also a podcaster and the author of several books, including The Sacred Art of Joking and The Gospel According to a Sitcom Writer. James is a very funny, very thoughtful man, and we discuss a wide-ranging assortment of topics on today's show, so I do hope you enjoy. James Cary, welcome to the Act One podcast.
Thanks very much for having me. It's an honor to be part of such august company. Previous guests, I've been listening to the podcast and I've really enjoyed it. So I feel I'm kind of out of my league here, but thanks for having me anyway.
Well, you are not out of your league, I assure you. And it's a real treat to be able to talk to you. I discovered you on YouTube. So I guess some good things come out of YouTube. But
the algorithm works or doesn't work. Who knows? I guess the audience can be the judge.
Yeah, I think I was looking for Rick and Morty clips, and I came up with you. No,
yes, that's right. I'd be very disappointing on that score.
No, but I found you just making some really fascinating, interesting commentaries on being a Christian who is a screenwriter and writing comedy. And I was like, man, I really would like to connect with this guy. And so I reached out to, I think it was Steve Turner, actually. And I said, do you know this guy? And he was like, no, but I might know someone who does. And so that's actually how I got your contact.
Here we are.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, you are on the other side of the pond. It's late there.
No, you're on the other side of the pond.
Sorry. I can't keep up. I don't know which
one. Is that too hostile? Sorry, that's just not.
I should have put an American flag up just behind me, just so you know where I stand. Okay. So yeah, you're over there, and one of the things I wanted to just kind of talk with you about is some of the differences that maybe people aren't aware of writing for television in the English system versus writing over here in the American Hollywood system. So I wonder if we could just kind of start there. If you could kind of just give us a little bit of a glimpse into your career as a screenwriter for our audience, just to familiarize them. I'll give links where they can find your shows and your books and all that kind of stuff. But I was wondering if you could just kind of tell our audience just a little bit about how you got started as a screenwriter, and maybe some of the things that you've been able to do over the years.
Yeah, thank you. I loved it when you said, what's the system over here in the UK? We don't really have a system over here. It's an absolute shambles. And I often say to new writers when they say, what do you do? How do you get in? How do I phrase this pitching document? What's the format? I always say it's like no one's ever made a TV show before, let alone a comedy show before. And I think it's because a lot of UK comedy comes from the stage. The tradition of the old sitcoms come from like theatre, but also loads of the early comedians after World War II, loads of them were kind of from troupe entertainment, stuff like that. And they kind of transferred to radio. So over here in the UK, radio comedy is still a thing. And that's where I got started.
Really?
Yeah, sure. So radio commission like regular sitcoms. Radio 4, the BBC Radio 4 does that, and I got into that because I was writing comedy at university. I was studying theology, and at the University of Durham. I wanted to go to Cambridge, where loads of the great comedians went, and they rejected me twice. So that's kind of a callback, isn't it? You know, I went the next year to get in, and they said, no, we're not having you this time. So maybe I should apply a third time for a PhD or something, and they can reject me again, and the comedy trio will be complete.
The rule of three.
Yeah, the rule of three. There we go. Just for completeness. But yeah, so I went to the University of Durham, did loads of comedy there alongside my degree, and writing sketches and directing and that kind of stuff, and then went to the Edinburgh Festival with my group. And we did okay. And then radio kind of offer ways in for people with no track records to write sketches for this sort of topical radio show. So a very, very low kind of, it's not that clever. It's like a Saturday Night Live, but on radio. So it's kind of a bit slower. It's not as funny. It's not as outlandish, but so this was 20 years ago. That was a show called Weekending, and loads of other British comedy writers got their start writing for that show. And then I wrote a sitcom for the radio called Think the Unthinkable. I came up with an idea that kind of favored a young... So one of my bits of advice to writers, when I give them writers in their 20s, they say they want to write a sitcom. I say, my advice, be older, which is terrible advice, obviously. But when you're young, you want to write sketches. You've got loads of ideas. You don't have as much life experience. And so that's why, improv is a huge tradition where you are. Over here, kind of, there's other kind of stage sketch comedy kind of stuff, and improv is becoming a much bigger thing. But in those days, you have lots of ideas. So I wrote a lot of sketches too, and then I had this idea for a sitcom for the radio, and then from that radio sitcom, I did a few episodes of a TV show. So I worked on someone else's TV show, and in itself that is unusual to some extent because over here, they tend to make 6 or 8 episodes in a run rather than 22. Mm-hmm. But the one writer or the two people who write it, they tend to write all 6 of them. They just do all of them. Mm-hmm. So when I did I ended up doing a show called Bluestone 4-2, which is essentially MASH in Afghanistan, but with British bomb disposal guys. Me and my writing partner did a series of 8 and then a series of 7 and a series of 6, and we wrote all of them. We had one other guy come in to help in series 3. Mm-hmm. But I managed to get a bit of experience on another show called My Family, which is like a domestic kind of sitcom, with a big sofa and set in a house with a family. And then I also did another show called My Hero. I did 6 episodes of that. It's a studio sitcom. It's kind of like Mork and Mindy. I mean, the show creator won't thank me for saying that, but that's kind of what it was. It was like, hey, my boyfriend's a superhero from another planet, kind of thing. So Superman, the sitcom. So I got loads of experience through doing that kind of thing as well. So I've had a bit of an unusually mixed experience of doing radio comedy, sketches, sitcom, TV sitcom, writing on someone else's show, developing my own show. The best known thing I've done here in the UK is that there was a show called Miranda, which I think was going to be developed for the US at one point, although I don't think I was going to receive any residuals or royalties for that. But yeah, so I did a sitcom with Miranda Hart, and I wrote the first couple of series with her, and this other guy I did Bluestone 4-2 with. So that's kind of, and I've done some kid stuff as well for children's BBC and written a couple of books too. So it's been a bit of a messy CV, but I feel like I've survived. I've made a living, and right now, making a living feels like you're winning.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think it always does. That's right. And when you talk about writing sketch comedy versus the sitcoms, can you just describe to us a little bit maybe the differences between the sketch comedy writing versus the I'm assuming is it half hour? We would call it half hour over here. Yeah.
So at the BBC half hour, because it's not a commercial station, it actually is a half hour. It's 28 and a half minutes. And your half hour is about 22. Yeah. But yeah, loads of those shows are played over here, like, Friends and Frasier and MASH and Cheers. And, we guys think we think you guys are amazing at sitcom because we only get the absolute cream of the crop. And you guys think, you only get our good stuff too. So you think that we're amazing too. So there's a lot of mutual admiration going on until you actually dig a little deeper. But with sketches, so sketches are, they tend to be 2-3 minutes long. And I guess Saturday Night Live has sketches in it. And there was another show called Mr. Show, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Show.
But
yeah.
you guys that typically haven't done sketch shows like over here in the UK. There were lots and lots of sketch shows, hardly any at the moment. I think it's because it's an expensive form of TV because you've got so many setups and so many, but actually that's where you get lots of new writing voices, and they get to try themselves out in that environment. And a sketch is basically an idea, isn't it? It's like somebody having an idea, and it's like, here's a regular situation, here's a complication, here are some jokes on that theme, and then here's a little twist, and you're done. So my Sitcom Geeks co-host, Dave Cohen, he goes back to this is all in Aristotle. This is in his Poetics. It's like, it's a situation, then there's a twist, and then there's a little thing at the end. Although I think Aristotle says it better than that. I think my classical Greek's not much good. My New Testament Greek is getting better. I'm trying to learn every day New Testament Greek.
Yeah, I think Aristotle is very famous for that quote and that little and a little thing at the end.
That little thing at the end. I think that's right. Yeah. So get that on a T-shirt. That's what he meant, anyway. I don't know.
With the sketch writing, is it? I'm just curious in terms of culturally over there, and even in the business. It's like Monty Python's Flying Circus. Is that kind of the standard bearer? Like, to this day, do people look back on it? Kind of, for instance, like here, the quintessential, if people want to have a long view of sitcoms here, the quintessential sitcom here is I Love Lucy, right? So like because it established the 3-camera, what we call the multi-camera format, right? And so it kind of is the one that many people point back to here. Is there a particular show that you would say you guys look back to as kind of like the standard bearer
for the sitcom?
For the sitcom, yeah.
Yeah, I get, maybe there are a few actually. I mean, there's one which is still relatively recent, called Only Fools and Horses, although it's 30 years ago now. So that's about a working class guy kind of pulling himself up by his bootstraps. There was a really big show called Hancock. So Tony Hancock was a very famous comedian, and that was a very big show on the radio. It transferred to TV. So he was this kind of pretty pompous guy who was often in different situations, and it was quite a mixed. They often just changed the situation completely, and it didn't seem to matter, and it was a bit looser. And then the guys who wrote that, then did a show called Steptoe and Son, which was a big show over here, but became Sanford and Son over.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. And then there are other shows like it was called either Till Death Us Do Part or In Sickness and in Health, which became All in the Family, I think, over with Archie Bunker.
Yeah, Archie Bunker.
Yeah. So the British Archie Bunker is called Alf Garnett, and he lives in the East End of London, and he rants and raves about everything. So yeah, there are quite a few. There are quite a few going back, and it's the ones you remember when when you're growing up. You remember the ones, and those are the ones that you just think, well, that is a sitcom, that is it, and you spend a lot of your life trying to write that show. You're trying to recapture that feeling. I think there's a lot about sitcom where you are when you first watch them, and that feeling of security or excitement. If you're a recent graduate, you've just left home and you're watching Friends, and you're living in a big city, suddenly you feel like you could be friends with Ross and Rachel and Joey. So there are so many things going on with a sitcom. They're just a fascinating genre.
I watched way too much television when I was a kid. It's clearly established in my family that I watched way too much. My siblings. I'm the youngest of 4.
Me too.
Okay, excellent.
And my parents had given up trying to regulate how much TV I watched as well.
That's exactly what happened. The parents were like, okay, whatever. And we got to watch stuff we probably shouldn't have because our older siblings watched it. And my siblings called me the walking TV guide, because I knew when everything came on, because this was back when there was only like 4 or 5 channels. And I knew when everything came on, at what time, on what station, that whole thing. And I grew up watching, there were so back 80s television was just packed solid with sitcoms. I mean, that was just because I was not only watching what was currently on, but all the ones from the 70s and 60s were on repeats here. And so I was devouring all of those as well. And I'm just curious, for you growing up, you mentioned you're the youngest of 4. Did you grow up a TV kid? Were you and as such, did that kind of inspire your interest in screenwriting?
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, I was only interested in 2 things really growing up, especially as TV was concerned, was cricket, which I guess doesn't travel particularly well, we have crickets. Is that what you're talking about? No, I'm talking about the game that can last 5 days and still be declared a draw. Then there's so I watched cricket and I watched comedy. And I kind of didn't really have any use for anything else. I just kind of didn't really see the point of it. Maybe documentaries was fine, but just dramas with no jokes. It's like, where are the jokes? What's the point of this? And the more interested I became in comedy as I went to university, particularly, actually even when I was like 13, 14, 15, I started writing sketches because I now look back and see I wanted to understand how comedy worked. I wanted to understand why people laughed. I wasn't actually, oddly, that interested in making people laugh, as in I could do it and I did do it. But some comedians will tell you that when they're on stage and they get a laugh, they just get this amazing rush and it's addictive. Like, I can see that. I kind of don't get that. And I do perform now a little bit, especially in church contexts, and I do get a big laugh on this and that. But I don't need that. He says in denial. I don't need that in the way that I do know that some comedians do. They really do live for that. Whereas I get immense satisfaction sitting in an audience. So I write a show with a guy called Milton Jones, who's a stand-up comedian. And it's kind of almost like a goon show, silly, kind of big story. I love being in the audience as it's recorded. They don't know that I'm one of the writers. And when I hear them laugh, I just think, we won. We got that one. And then I hear them laugh at the next one. That feels good. And then at the end, when they give a round of applause for the writers who are named, I just sit there looking around going, I wonder who this James Cary guy is. I'm not going to tell anybody. So, but there's that immense, incredible satisfaction.
It's almost like an intellectual exercise for you.
Yeah. In a way, jokes are a bit like crossword puzzles. And if you get the audience laugh, you think you can tick that one. You did it. What's the next one?
That's fascinating. Where do you think that?
It's deranged. It's like, send help. This isn't good, is it?
I mean, is it one of those things where you, growing up, you were obsessed with trying to figure out, wait, why is this thing funny? So you constantly, like the way my son likes to tinker with why things work, right? They try to take things apart. Is that you literally spent a lot of your early childhood trying to take apart jokes?
Yeah, I did. And I memorized stuff, and I would memorize stuff and not even know why it was funny. And then when I said it, it would be funny. So, my parents or their friends might laugh. And sometimes they were laughing at the fact that I was saying something that I clearly didn't understand. But it was just, again, it kind of all went in and it all made me think, okay. So that kind of thing works. And that rhythm kind of works. And actually, funny enough, being a Christian and going to a Christian school was a huge blessing to me, because we had to do sketches in our school assembly, in our chapels, and I would sometimes write those or be involved with those. In our Christian Union meeting, there was a voluntary Christian meeting, but it was because it was a really positive Christian school. The Christian meeting was really big, and so you got to do sketches in front of 100 people, and you kind of almost got a genuine audience. And then when I went to university, I already had a bit of a head start on a load of other people who had ideas of doing what I was doing. So then you were, practicing on non-Christians who aren't quite so kind. Although having said that, maybe we'll come on to this, Christians in the UK at least aren't great laughers, so they're kind of a bit worried about laughing. So there's a bit of a gap when they just think, is this one okay? Okay, we can laugh at this one. There's always been that constant experimentation. And I guess I never thought it would become a career until partly I failed to get other jobs, which guaranteed me a regular income. And when I applied for those jobs, they could tell I didn't want to do them. They could tell that my passions were elsewhere. Wow. I applied for a job in advertising and they said, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I now know the answer isn't writing a sitcom for the television, because that's what I said. Yeah. And so saying to them in 5 years' time, I don't want to be working for you, that's not smart, is it?
In the interview.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm glad I said it unwittingly. You know, I spoke truer than I knew. And I guess within 5 years, I kind of was writing sitcoms.
Wow.
So there we go.
Do you feel and we'll obviously unpack a lot of the spiritual components, because you have written extensively and you talk extensively about how your faith is so much a part of what you do and informs who you are not only as a person, but as an artist and a writer. But I'm just curious, like, was there there are some people, not a lot of people, there are some people that consider themselves called. They feel like God has called them to do these kind of things. Did you ever get anything feel like you did that? Or was it just literally like, I'm just going to keep walking through these doors?
Yeah, I felt like I've had numerous 2 or 3 times when I thought, am I doing the right thing? Should I be going for ministry? Should I become a pastor? Because in a way, that's what all my friends were doing, and all my, I knew lots of people who were doing that, and just thinking, I'm the kind of person who does that. Am I doing that? And I just never quite had the passion to do it. I mean, I didn't have an angelic visitation telling me to stay comedy writing or to work for the BBC or anything like that. So I never felt really super called, no audible voices, no burning bits of scripture saying you will go and do this or that. But it just felt like that my sense of humor, comedy, my writing abilities was something I wanted to develop. And actually, leaving university and moving to London and developing them, it's something I did completely separate from the church, in the sense of I wasn't seeking Christian support. I wasn't seeking church gigs. I was just getting out there writing secular comedy for BBC Radio and then television. It's only more recently that I've kind of fused the two together because I'm interested to do that. But yeah, so, and I think it's one of the points I make in other areas where I think we've got a bit of a problem with our sense of humor as a church, and also with our culture. And if we believe that politics is downstream from culture, the politicians are more terrified than anybody else, and they're only doing what the cultural elites are telling them to do. That's where they're getting their cues from. So the real people are the cultural elites and the artists. So if we want to be a church that's going to, depends on how your theology of the end times is, but if you think we've got decades or hundreds of years rather than minutes before Christ returns, then we're going to want to get upstream and infect the culture and affect the culture. So the church should be probably a bit more strategic about taking a few of the talented, articulate young men and women and saying, I know you're thinking about ministry, but have you thought about writing a sitcom? Which sounds crazy, but I guess Will and Grace had a pretty big effect, didn't it?
Yeah.
And on that one issue, there are loads of other issues, and I just picked that one because it's the most obvious example of a sitcom changing people's mind. I think going back in history, we didn't get it over here, but Murphy Brown, I believe, changed the view of divorce. And these things,
single parenting, changed the view on single parenting.
Okay, single parenting. Okay, yeah. So we never got it over here, but I sense that was a culturally extremely significant show. So if we want to affect the culture, then sitcoms is as good a place to do it as any. It's partly reflecting and it's partly changing the culture. But we're not great at sending people into that. So any pastors listening may want to think about that advice they keep giving to young people to go into the church. Well, most of them, maybe that's fine. But are there one or two who you could kind of push towards Hollywood?
Yeah.
I think they may be more they may have more impact there than we might know or realize.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's one of the things we talk about at Act One is maybe in lieu of seminary or
Yeah.
maybe in addition to seminary, go to film school. And because one of the things we talk about Act One is artists tend to be the tip of the spear, and screenwriters and filmmakers, we tend to be the tip of the spear. We tend to be the one that is in there first, and like you said, we can sit around and argue whether or not the cultural elites should have the influence that they have, or you should just accept that they had that influence and want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And
I guess it's both and. We want to send some people into politics too, and we want to send some into the church. It's a team game. We fight this war together. Yeah. We are a happy band of warriors together. Victory is certain. It's going to take a while, and we're going to get pounded in the meantime. But the flip side is, as I often say to writers, is failure is certain. Success is the outlier.
That's right.
And what I love about what you guys do in America is if you get a successful show, you run it and 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 run it. Not least because, make hay while the sun shines. I mean, I don't know if that's an expression for you, but yeah. So all of the money that's generated through that hit, partly goes into the pockets of people, but is partly then invested in all of the failures that are required to find that next gem.
That's right.
So and I think that's one thing that Christians ironically find hard is creativity is such an incredibly wasteful process. And actually Christians want to de-risk everything.
Yep.
And yet some of the greatest comedians and the greatest writers, they eventually get their show on, we watch the pilot and, oh, wow, this stinks. Ouch, this is terrible. How could nobody see ahead of time that this wasn't going to work? And they didn't. It's a very, very risky process. And so Christians, more than anyone, should be prepared to take those risks and encounter the failures,
For you, James, have you ever had any issues with navigating your professional career as a person of faith? Has there been times when it has been either a net plus or a net minus for you?
I mean, I've always been fairly open about my faith just because people know, and I kind of don't care. And I guess there are maybe one or two gigs I've never even heard about because people might think that I'm probably not someone that they want to work with. And I understand that. I guess there are other people on the flip side who I don't want to work with. So that's up to them. I tend to find that when you're in the room with someone and you actually just talk about stuff, people are, much friendlier and less worried. Because ultimately, especially within comedy, it's kind of funniest wins, really. It's like, what's the best joke? What's the most, and the best joke is probably the most truthful joke that's truthful to the character and the situation. And so I think there's always that thing that it's kind of going to win in the end. I guess if I worked in a different kind of comedy if I was involved in a show that was satirizing everything for any reason, that might become a bit more problematic, but that's kind of not really where I feel I've been called. I think there's a Christian way of doing that. And I think, those guys at the Babylon Bee are doing a pretty good job of treading those waters and offending everyone occasionally. I love the second funniest things in the Babylon Bee after the headlines are the comments, especially the comments that are essentially, I normally find the Babylon Bee really funny, but I just don't think that this joke, in brackets, about Presbyterians is fit for comedy. It's like, okay, they picked on the thing that you like. Okay, great. I'm pleased to see that. And the fact that you don't see that makes it even funnier.
So true.
But yeah, I think in a way, I don't really feel that there's stuff that's necessarily even off limits as a comedy writer. I think everything that there is a way of dealing with most things. It's just, it's the job of the artist to find what they are. And there have been times when I've been involved with shows which have bits or scenes in them. I just think, I don't like the tone of that, but I don't. And sometimes I manage to say my piece and sometimes I don't. TV is a team game. Each episode involves 150 people. And if you don't want to play it as a team, then raise your own money and make it exactly as you want it. So if you've got £2 million to make your sitcom, then great, make a sitcom in your own image, and it'll probably not be as good as if it has other voices and people getting in the way and annoying you, pointing out stuff that you don't want to see. So I see the collaborative aspect as both frustrating and improving, but most of these things are hard won and the better for it. And when I write with my writing partner, Richard, who is not a believer, not a Christian believer, we tend to find that if a joke makes both of us laugh, then we're onto something. And if one of us doesn't really like it, then we tend to bin it. He occasionally fights his corner harder than me and I give way. But I do dig in on one or two things. On one show we did, the one set in the army in Afghanistan, I just can't stand the sound of blasphemy, even though it's truthful that characters blaspheme. I don't like to hear it. So occasionally I would change blasphemies to swear words. I mean, that kind of made it better. So yeah, I kind of would, and he would occasionally change them back again. I would say, oh, okay, you found the one I changed it back. Okay, you can have that one. But in a way, it's like, it's just a question of understanding that people in sitcoms do and say things that I don't agree with and that I wouldn't do or say, just as Jesus tells parables about people who do unwise things. And so, we have to be biblical in the way we approach how texts work and how characters work within stories and how they are presented. So I feel fine on that, but occasionally you get that twinge. But in terms of the upside, though, I do feel liberated as a Christian, because I was saying earlier, because failure is so common, and you have to put your absolute heart and soul in it to be even within a chance of success. You have to really, really believe in a show, because if they get a whiff of the fact that you don't believe in it, it's going to feel inauthentic. It's going to feel fake. So you really do have to wear your heart on your sleeve and open yourself up and just put it all in. And, and knowing that they're probably going to say no is just so hard. If I were not a Christian, I think I would find it unbearable. And I'm amazed at the level of pushback that is normal in the industry, that people without a faith can withstand. I think they're heroic to be as stoical as they are to cope with that level of failure. I've got God's providence to fall back on. I remember when I came close to getting a TV series on that had been a successful radio series, and it was pitched to the BBC. And I did pray before we did the read through in front of the executives. I prayed to myself, Lord, if this is going to make me a better Christian, and if this is going to be a blessing to your kingdom, I pray it's commissioned. And if it is not going to be those things, I pray that it isn't. And I've just given it over to God. I think this is a funny show. I would like BBC One to do it. Did they do it? No. But I'd prayed the prayer beforehand and just said, not my will, but yours. I know those words were originally used in a different context, so I don't want to sound too sanctimonious. But that's kind of what you have to say. And so in a way, I found that, I found being a Christian actually a huge relief in an industry that is full of uncertainty, failure, criticism. I've had pages of, bad reviews as well for stuff I've done. My Afghanistan comedy, Bluestone 4-2, had a couple of really, really negative reviews where they wanted it to be an anti-war sitcom. And we weren't trying to do that. We were trying to show why soldiers really enjoy being soldiers. We were trying to show why they wanted to deploy to a dangerous situation. So that, but I could take it because my identity is not in my work. My identity is in Christ. And because of that, I can cope with a few slings and arrows, but some of them hurt after a while, and you have to sit on the bench and that's okay too. And I had a couple of shows get knocked back a couple of years ago, and I slightly went away to lick my wounds just because it really hurt, especially because there was one show we were pitching and we were doing a read through in front of the channel, and they'd already publicly said a few weeks earlier that they had no interest in doing studio sitcoms, especially not family pre-Watershed ones. So what we were doing felt like an utter waste of time. And we'd spent, months and months on this pilot script. And so I had to kind of go away and recover. but that's okay. I wrote a couple of books and did some radio and, you know, did some other bits and pieces, and, you know, and then you set sail again. You know, you set out to sea hoping you're not going to get dashed on the rocks again.
The life of a writer, it's to borrow a biblical analogy, constantly sowing, occasionally reaping. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Constantly sowing, occasionally reaping. You know, I love what you're saying, James. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in what you're saying. In a sense, this is one of the, I don't know about for you, but one of the saddest things for me is to interact with Christians in the business who don't see their work and their life and their faith in this context, in the sense that we don't have to walk around with the same kind of hopelessness that someone who is not a Christian. We don't have to walk around with all that fear. I mean, you know, Hollywood out here is just, I mean, it's run by fear. Everyone is afraid, and every meeting you go into, it's all about, you know, is this going to help my career? Is this going to hurt my career? Am I the one that's going to say yes to the next great show or great film? Or am I the one who's going to say no to the next great show? Like, and so there's so much fear, and one of the saddest things for me is to see Christians who get caught up in that same fear, and who walk in that same fear, and who walk in that same sense of hopelessness. And we don't have to, because, like you said, we rely on a different source of strength and our identity, at least where it should. And so for you, where do you go to encourage yourself to stay centered in God's presence and in your Christian walk? I'm just curious for our audience, like just your own personal discipleship. Like for you, how do you stay centered with your faith?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very easy to get caught by the bubble. If you're in show business, you do feel a bit magic and special, and therefore you maybe feel like you don't quite belong in church. But I've always tried to make sure that I go to church with people who actually probably don't really understand what I do, because what I do is not really all that special in the grand scheme of things. Some of them are teachers, some of them are nurses. Some of them, in my part of the world, some of them make helicopters. Some of them assemble Apache helicopters. And so we're all called to do different things. We're all part of the body. So it kind of doesn't matter on that level. So I just think being involved in church fully rather than partially. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I've held back from trying to move to where you are. Because obviously, wouldn't I love to be writing Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Yeah. I love that show. I absolutely love that show. I love mainstream comedies with jokes in them. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I love the Goldbergs. I love Modern Family. Big fan of all those shows. And part of me just thinks, oh, I should have not had kids, or I should have had one kid, and we should have moved to California, and I should have, gone on one of those shows, and hey, I could be a showrunner by now. And in a way, you just think, well, that's great. Would I see my kids? No. Could I take part in a church fully? No. Do I think that Christians therefore can't be showrunners? No, I don't think that at all. I think some do that brilliantly, and it's not for me to say. And again, these things are seasons of your life, and that's maybe something I'd be open to in the future. But I just know right now, my kids are fairly young. We now home educate, and there's time and there's eternity. So in one sense, I try to make some career choices that aren't going to put me in those places where it does feel like you're in the valley of darkness. And then when you just look at scripture, it's pretty hard to avoid the constant command not to worry. I think we're told to not worry more than we're told to love each other. I think love each other is a nice to have. I think don't worry is pretty basic, and we live in a society now which is saying how much we love each other because we want equality and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of hate under the surface, and there's so much anxiety. It's worry, 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 worry. And there are plenty of people who love the fact that we're worried because it means they can sell us stuff and
Yeah.
make sure we subscribe and click and follow and, talk their opinions. So yeah, that injunction to not worry, I do take really seriously. And I think I'm aided by I think God has blessed me with what P.G. Woodhouse would call a sunny disposition, a sunny disposition. So I'm a bit of an optimist, and I don't, so I'm aware that it's all right for me. But yeah, there are plenty of times when you think, what am I doing? What? And you switch on the TV and you just think, this show doesn't work. Why is this show on TV? This doesn't work. Who's watching this? I can tell you that. Okay, all that kind of stuff. So I have those moments too. So yeah, obviously I'm talking a good game on a podcast. That's the easy bit.
That's the easy bit. Yeah, especially today. There's so many shows these days. There's just so much stuff out there that when someone sends me a thing or mentions, hey, you should check this show out, I'm like, I just don't have time. Like I'll do my best to get around to it, but I have to be so careful with my time these days, because I too am a father and a husband, and you just there's not enough time to watch everything, and so when someone tells you that something's good and it's not, you're just like, why did I waste my time watching that?
And it's so annoying when there is a show that I want to watch with my kids. My kids are 11 and 13. The one show that I really want to watch with them, because I loved it as a student, but it's such a lovely show, was the series Due South.
Yeah, Due South. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh man, what a great show. Benton Fraser, the Mountie, sort of almost Jesus, you know what I mean? Yeah. He's such a perfect figure, but he's kind of too perfect, and that chemistry and stuff. Is that on Netflix? Is that on Prime? Is that anywhere I can find it? No, it's available on DVDs for about £100. It's like, I'm not going to pay £100. It's just like, so the one show I do want to watch, I can't find, and there's 500 scripted shows coming down the line at me. It's just like, I want the one with the Mountie and the angry Italian Chicago guy and the wolf. Can I have that show? Yeah.
And the wolf. Okay, so let's go here. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but since we're here,
let's do it.
Since we're here, I want to know your television guilty pleasure. So I'm gonna start off with mine. So my television guilty pleasure, I doubt very seriously you ever saw it, but it's my favorite. It's my favorite. As a kid, don't ask me why I gravitated to this show. I just did, but I own all the copies of it on DVD to this day. True story. My wife makes fun of me. Is Remington Steele, starring Pierce Brosnan, the young Pierce Brosnan, and Stephanie Zimbalist. This PI detective show that was like it was at the same time as another show out here called Moonlighting, and Moonlighting was I think probably of the two shows, it was the bigger show, the more popular show, and of course it was the launch of Bruce Willis and stuff. But man, this is how bad I was. I saved the advertisements, you'd call them adverts, from the TV Guide of like when the season premiere of Remington Steele was coming on. Like, this is the kind of weird stuff that I would do. So, all right, so that's my true confession.
Oh, wow.
Okay. All right, so what
is
a guilty pleasure that you're embarrassed to admit that you absolutely loved this show?
I don't know if I've got any shame when it comes to watching TV. Because Moonlighting was amazing, and that's the other show that I find myself wanting to write the whole time. I've just written a spec script about it's a sort of romantic comedy, will they, won't they couple who are trying to solve mysteries. It's not really a murder mystery show. So that's kind of another show that I always find myself trying to repeat. One of the shows, which was, I don't know how guilty it is, but there was a big show at the time for you, but it's not well remembered, is the Phil Silvers Show.
I remember Phil. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I've seen it and I've watched it. Yeah,
it was shown over here in the UK in the 90s. and known as Bilko. It was just billed as Bilko, even though the opening card said the Phil Silver Show. And I think they knew people would like it because we had Top Cat as well, which is basically Bilko with cats. But yeah, no, I've got on my shelf somewhere the Bilko box set. Here it is. Yeah. There's one I can show you. So,
Sergeant Bilko. Steve Martin made a really bad film about it.
I think we'd rather that he hadn't. One of the movies, there are some movies like that I love, and one of them would be The Three Amigos. Talking of
no, how dare you, sir? How dare you? Three Amigos is not a guilty pleasure. That's one of my favorite films of all time.
It's a great movie. It's a great movie. But your defensiveness about it would suggest that you feel guilty. I'm sensing guilty pleasure.
All I have to say to you, James, is kiss me on the veranda.
Okay.
Lips will be fine.
The lips will be fine. Sometimes you don't overplan these things. So yeah, there are so many moments. I have shown that movie to my kids actually. I don't know. I think in terms of guilty, I don't know if I've got many other guilty pleasures because I just call them pleasures. I have to be careful on YouTube. I've latched onto this guy who makes very long YouTube videos about missing 411 cases. There's a guy, people go missing in national parks in America, but also in other parts of the world. And it sort of turned into, because we used to get highlights of like public access television that you guys had over there, which was not a possibility over here. And it feels like this guy's completely nailed public access TV without realizing it. So he's got some fascinating stories to tell about people who go missing in national parks. And they're kind of weird and creepy stories. But it's kind of turned into a bit of a soap opera of this guy's life as well. He's had some really terrible tragedies recently as well. And he talks a lot about mental illness and that kind of stuff. And people write him letters about the way that he looks and that they wish he wouldn't talk about this other stuff. And he kind of doesn't care. And it's just like the whole thing feels like it could be one big character. And I can't look away. So YouTube is now my guilty pleasure. What I'm realizing, I really have to stop clicking. This algorithm is really worrying. And then occasionally my daughter uses my iPad and she starts looking up videos about crochet. And so now the YouTube algorithm has no idea who I am. And I'm watching World War II videos about history and, goofy comedy and crochet. And they're just like, this guy's clearly having some kind of identity crisis.
Does not compute. Good luck. I must confess, if I'm not careful, I go down on YouTube. I go down the, I don't know if you guys have it there, but I go down the Judge Judy rabbit hole. Just clips. There's this court show over this. We got
it over here. And then we made our own version, and we're so grateful for you sending that over to us. Thanks so much.
I don't know why. I don't even watch the show, but somehow on YouTube the clips come up, and I just keep clicking. I don't know why.
I'm a theme tunes guy, so I incessantly go after theme tunes, and so the moment that iTunes kind of started with access to theme tunes, I kind of spent a lot of money on that, and the fact that I could own, and I used to buy CDs of them. In fact, I used to buy cassettes of them. I know I'm 45. I can remember cassettes. The best of which, going back to Remington Steele, has to be Magnum PI, doesn't it? I mean, is there a better?
Yes.
Is there a better theme tune in the world than Magnum PI?
So you and I are probably going to be best friends after this, because I'm the same way. I at least for that period of time, so 70s, 80s, 90s, I could pretty much just off of the one word I can hum or sing to you any song. At least for a while there, I was like, I'd have people quiz me and I could do it, because I same thing. I love theme songs. And I remember in college, someone gave me a CD. It was like top 50 greatest TV theme songs. I was like, that's the coolest thing ever.
That's the best thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Yeah. No, I'm just the same.
I think we're going to like each other after this, but I don't think anyone's going to like us. We're
not going to. Yes, that's right. I think listeners should just tune out. No. We'll talk about something else.
So let me go back to, you were talking about family and kind of how that kind of helps you, your church life and your family life. I'm curious. I've actually never asked anyone this question before, so I'd love to just hear your thoughts on it. But so you started in the business before kids, right?
Yeah,
And
I've never had any other job other than being involved in writing, so I've been very fortunate that way. So yeah.
So you were a professional screenwriter before kids, and you're a professional screenwriter now after kids. While having kids, you said 11 and 13. How did becoming a father, how has that affected, would you say, your writing? How has it changed? Because you and I both know, as fathers, our perspectives change in so many different ways. I'm curious, for our conversation, did it in any way affect you, your writing?
Yeah, I guess it must have done. You do see the world differently. You know, you change a bit with marriage, and then you change again with kids, and also it gives you plenty to write about as well. I believe they used to say when they reached a brick wall on Everybody Loves Raymond, they just said, "Okay, everybody go home and have an argument with your spouse."
That's right.
That's about it in the morning, because that's our show. So yeah, I do say to my wife, actually, I say, thank you for marrying me. If you hadn't have married me, I would just work all the time. And it wouldn't be good work. It would just be work. And I have no doubt that I've changed and changed for the better, I think, as a result of my godly and loyal, faithful wife. And then kids come along and that changes you again. And it means that when you watch that bit in the movie Crash, where they put that invisible necklace over that, oh my goodness, it just makes me want to well up just thinking about it. It's just like, oh my word. So yeah, there are things you can't watch anymore. But yeah, it does change you, and it does make you realize that what you're writing has more consequences. But in a way, you kind of have to ride that out and just think, well, you know, if people shouldn't really let their kids watch it. You know, my show set in Afghanistan, my kids can't watch that. They came out to South Africa with me when we were filming that in South Africa, because obviously you can't film in Afghanistan because it's an extremely dangerous country. I don't know if this has made it over to where you are. They can't watch the show because it's absolutely full of swearing and explosions, and that's like, I don't want them to pick up language like that. So I think, you know, you do have to just keep writing and try to keep that freedom and just be truthful. But you are aware that what you do has resonance, consequences, legacy. So, you know, you just want to be a bit more careful. You do become a bit more community minded in that sense, I think. At least I hope you do. Maybe some don't. And maybe that's okay. I don't really know.
Let's shift a little bit and let's talk comedy. I'd love to know from you, and I know that I'm asking a basic question that has a very complex answer. And the worst part about talking about comedy is that it's unfunny to just talk about comedy.
It is typically not funny.
How do you write funny? How do you write comedy? Do you set out to, because you were talking earlier about your process of deconstructing almost, and I'm just curious, like, do you set out, because I'm sure that we have a lot of people listening who are either comedy writers themselves or aspiring comedy writers. So is there a particular approach you have to plot or character, to setups? Just curious, what can you tell us about your process on how you write comedy?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it goes a bit back to what I was saying earlier about when you're younger, you tend to write sketches, and when you're older, you can write sitcoms. And I think my process has changed, and I think that's kind of normal. So when you're starting out and you love jokes, then you're just trying to work out a way of getting from one joke to the next joke, and that's kind of, and also you think you've got a certain number of them, so you kind of want to eke them out and make them last and make the most of the ones that you have and all that kind of stuff. And so that's when you know, and there are funny tweets that you can do now, and there are sketches you can write, and there's improv, and the improv can go round and round and last forever. But after a while, it's not a very satisfactory situation. And in a way, my writing partner Richard sometimes talks about how actually comedy is like exercising a muscle, and you sort of have to trust yourself that you're going to be funny when you get into a particular situation. And if you're writing situation comedy, sitcoms are all about characters. And I've been teaching a lot of this stuff recently through some of the online courses and stuff that I do. And I think everybody wants to talk about story arcs. Story arc. I've got this amazing story, and I'm sort of saying to people, I think what you've got there is a really long movie with a beginning and a middle and an end, and that's cool. That's fine. That's not a sitcom. A sitcom is where the characters are funny, and you tune in for the characters, and you're trying to find different situations for the characters to be in. And I was just thinking about this when you were interviewing the writer. I think it was Jeremy Howe talking about Big Bang Theory. And by the end, they were really struggling to find stuff they hadn't done before. But what's really interesting about that is the fact that they know they've got brilliant comedy actors, they've got characters that work, and they've got a funny situation. And so they just know that if they can think of an original story, then the characters are going to be funny. And that the writers are sort of almost writing down what the characters would just be saying in a way. You're just sort of predicting what the character would say rather than writing it. So, but it's so hard to get characters and situations that mesh together in a way that give you that regular feeling. Because a sitcom like Big Bang Theory is like a Happy Meal. It's like a cookie, as you would call them. We call them biscuits, but you call something else biscuits. And who knows what flapjack is? So
we call biscuits. Okay, that's what we call them.
Yeah, but I think we call what you call cookies, we call biscuits.
Yeah.
And I think we call your biscuits scones. I'm not quite sure. And some people call them scones. Are we going to send out notes for this episode? I feel we should issue some diagrams. I think that would be helpful. So I lost my train of thought. Oh, that's right. People love comedy sitcoms because of the feeling that they get watching them. There's that feeling of familiarity. We know the characters. We know in Cheers that Norm's going to say something funny when he walks in the bar, and they're all going to go, Norm! And Woody's going to say something, and Norm's going to say something funny back. And we love it. In a way, there's no surprise to that, but the words themselves are surprising. It's kind of a delight. I think that's the way God set the universe up as well. He created 7 days, and so there's an order to creation where we just go round and round and round the same. That's how jazz works. You have a series of chords and you go round and round. That's how a pop song works. That's how a Bach fugue works. So I think sitcoms are kind of tapping into that, source code of the universe, which is situation and characters interacting with each other. And there are an infinite number of varieties, and sometimes there are an infinite number of episodes, and The Simpsons are still going. And I hear that South Park's just been recommissioned. They just don't ever stop. But in a way, it's like, yeah, that can keep going pretty much forever.
And it's because of the characters, like you were saying, right? Like that for TV, for film, we go and we love to sit in front of the big, huge image that transports us to another world. But and obviously you can get that with television, but more than anything with television, I love what you're saying. It really is about those characters. We want to see what happens when Archie Bunker is confronted with that situation, or that when Lucille Ball and Lucy is confronted with that conveyor belt or whatever, or Michael Scott is confronted with something in the office, or like that. We love these characters, and we want to see how they are going to react, how they're going to respond in those kind of different situations. And when you are crafting a character per se, are you thinking about, and I'm sure it's probably different for different circumstances, but how do you go about crafting different unique characters that you feel like, I think people are going to want to tune in every week to see them go through this situation? How do you craft those characters that you feel like are going to be appealing to people over a long stretch of time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know whether I just think if they're funny, people are going to like them, even if they're not warm and friendly and cuddly. There are plenty of caustic characters, like, as you mentioned, Archie Bunker. He's the worst, isn't he? I mean, he's a terrible, terrible person. But the thing with characters like that is the stuff that they're saying, it's half true. It's not all true. Do you know what I mean? They say the things that other people may be thinking, and it may be not okay that they're thinking those things, but they've said it. And so, you know what I mean? These characters who are problematic kind of say stuff out loud and it's out in the open. It's kind of exhilarating. But when I've only recently realized how I write shows and how I come up with new shows is I do tend to think of the idea first. What's this sitcom really about? What's the funniest way of expressing this? And then once I've got that idea, who is carrying this story, or is this a relationship between two people? And what is the funniest? And I just came up with an idea recently for a workplace sitcom, and I just remembered actually my main guy, I think this is going to be funnier at home. Because maybe he now works from home because everybody works from home, so maybe that's fine. It's about his relationship with his other half, and this issue just keeps coming up again and again, and it's going to come up in a whole load of different ways because they fundamentally see life in different ways, and the character and everybody watching it will identify with one or the other, and if they identify with one, they're probably married to the other. So you kind of have to hope that they've got resonance in that situation. And then when you come up with stories, and I tend to, when I teach people about how to do this stuff as well, I say, look, just kind of come up with 100 stories. Just absolutely splurge with dozens and dozens of stories. And it may be that there are one or two characters who they don't kind of want to do anything. They're not giving you anything, in which case they're probably not right. You might want to take another look at them, or just see what happens if you just bin them, cut them. Quite often the least funny character is you. So you're writing this sitcom from your own point of view, and maybe you're writing about working in a hunting, shooting, fishing kind of shop because you used to work in one. And there's this character called Bob, who's kind of the one around whom everything revolves. And Bob is the least funny person in this show, and he's you. You've written yourself. Because you've made yourself the regular guy. You probably need to get rid of that guy or give him something funny to do, because otherwise he's going to be boring, or he's going to be gone by season 2. You'll have to fire yourself. That's not good. You don't want to have to do that. I did actually have a problem writing a sitcom a while back. I did another radio show fairly recently, a really small little show for Radio Wales. And there was one character I was having real problems with. I just couldn't work out why he wasn't giving me the plots and the stories. I really liked the character. And I did a personality test for him. I did a Myers-Briggs test, and discovered that he was me. And that's why I couldn't think of anything for him to do, because everything he seemed to think of just seemed entirely reasonable and not funny. So I learned that I'm a narcissist as well. That's another personality type. So yeah, it's all in the character. And once you've got them, you really do hear their voices. It really does feel like you're not writing. It really does feel like you're capturing what they're saying. And quite often, I did a straw poll on Twitter the other day about what do you find hardest in writing sitcoms? Dialogue, jokes, plot, or character? And it was really interesting. 57% of people said plot. I don't believe them.
Yeah.
I think they're finding plotting hard because their characters aren't right. And if your character isn't giving you options in your plot, if you can't tell what your character is going to do next, I don't think your character is kind of right. I think you're missing something. So I'd kind of go back, and quite often that's the problem, isn't it? Which is basic mechanics or weird alternative medicines as well. You've got to saw back, and somebody comes in and tickles your tiny toe and then shifts your ankle, and you start, and then you get up and wander around and you're fine. It's like there are these little things that have implications. So that's what I find anyway. I mean, I never studied this. I never studied screenwriting. I have no formal training. I have a degree in theology from the University of Durham. So I've kind of had to figure all this out for myself with trial and error. And I've gotten away with it so far. So I guess there's something to my process anyway.
Speaking of process, help us understand a little bit about your process over there versus over here. So, I've talked to several writers over here, and they've talked about the writer's room experience here. And it varies from, they're writing the episode in the room, literally page by page, to, and there's like 15 people in a room doing that, to people get divvied up episodes where they break the episodes in the room, and then they go off and get a chance to write those, and they write it maybe with other writers in the room, things like that. So a little bit of nuts and bolts on how it works with you guys. Is it similar yet different? And what is the typical process?
For a pure classic sitcom, we're not big on rooms. We tend to have a short series written by one or two people, and the process, and there's a rolling process for that. There's no pilot season. There's no system over here. The whole thing is a shambles. Apparently one channel's looking for stuff, and they're being offered stuff all year round, and they're saying yes and no, mostly no, all things round, all year round. And what normally happens.
So when a show, so like I know Stephen Moffat writes, like, so when it's a Stephen Moffat show, he literally has written everything. Like
that would have been the case. So when he started out, he wrote a show called Press Gang. He probably wrote all of those. And then he wrote a show called Coupling, which I think started in America and it didn't quite go. But he wrote every episode of that, 4 series of 6 episodes, I think. He wrote 24 episodes of that over the course of 4 years, and he would have written that in conjunction with his producer. And again, we don't really have showrunners in the same way. So the producer is not the writer by and large, but the producer runs the show.
Okay.
And they do everything they can to convince the writer that they're lucky to have a show on TV and they should just be grateful and do what the notes say. So
when you said you and your partner had written, you said you called it a series of 8 or a series of 6,
yeah.
whatever. So it's just you and your partner. There's not a room where you and other writers are breaking story or things like that.
Not really. I think maybe in the second series we got 1 or 2 extra guys in just to give us a bit of rocket fuel at the start. But yeah, they didn't write episodes. We just paid them for day rates here and there.
When you hear me describe our process over here, or when you've heard other people, do you think, what in the world? Or like, are you curious?
No, well, we're very familiar with it, and we just wish that we had it over here because also
really?
we'd all make more money. Because it's just that we just don't quite have the economies of scale. So, a studio is prepared to invest in a sitcom because Friends alone is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So the whole syndication thing, I think that's eroding a bit now because there's so much TV and all that kind of stuff. But your hits are big and they run long.
Mm-hmm.
But the financial upsides in the UK just aren't anywhere like as good as they are. And that's in the US or globally. I think that's changing with streaming a bit, but with streaming, you need to get all your money up front because you don't get much afterwards. So that's kind of changing the way things. Having said that, I have worked on a number of shows. I've worked on plenty of other people's shows, but I've not really been in a room with other writers for very long. And in fact, I literally today was just doing some last minute rewrite notes they're about to shoot an episode of a murder mystery show I wrote an episode of called Shakespeare and Hathaway. So it's actually a daytime show over here, but it's exported across the world. I think people think it's prime time in other parts of the world, but this one is set in Stratford upon Avon, and it's kind of a Shakespeare themed murder mystery thing. And it's a comedy show really, but it's a murder mystery, and it's sort of genre in that sense. And it's not a will they won't lay, but it's a man and a woman detective team, and it's a really fun show. It's series 4. It's partly because of lockdown, but I think I met with the people who make that show in January last year. I drove up to Birmingham, not your Birmingham, our Birmingham, the second largest city in the UK, and had lunch. And actually they make a couple of other shows as well, and I talked about those other shows, and then didn't speak to them again. And then there was a Zoom, and then after lockdown there was a Zoom chat, and then I ended up pitching for the Shakespeare and Hathaway show, and I pitched ideas and all that kind of stuff. I've never seen them. I've never been in the same room as them since. I wrote the episode and sent, and it was signed off in September last year. In October last year, and now they're able to film it because of COVID restrictions are lifted. And then other shows, I've kind of been in and out of the room. I did a show called Citizen Khan, which was a family studio sitcom. about an Asian family in the UK, and I was brought in to kind of write an episode with the star of that show. Wanted to write episodes, and I've got some experience of writing with the star of the show. I did it on Miranda. I do it with Milton Jones's show, and I tend to be able to cope with, the star. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to help them write the episode they really want to write. I'm not trying to write my show. I'm trying to help them write their show. So I've done that a fair bit as well. So I've got a fairly big, I think I've got an unusual range of experiences though in that sense. And lots of shows are kind of written by one person. And the usual thing is also they take 6 months deciding whether to make the show or not. And then they green light it and say, we want to shoot it in 3 months. And you're like, what? I've got to write 6 episodes in 3 months now, so it's going to be bad. Why did you do that? Why would you do that? Well, we've got a commissioning window. We should do it then, and the money's available. If we don't spend it this year, then it'll be gone. So it's just like the whole system over here is a joke, wow. And it's a miracle that in comedy at least. I think drama is a little bit more regimented, but in comedy because it's come from these army concert party stuff, and then the University Review, Cambridge Footlights, Beyond the Fringe, Monty Python stuff. It's just always appeared that comedy is thrown together right. Against the odds and without enough money. And somehow it's fine. And somehow it is fine. It's just unpredictable and strange. So I long for pilot season. But we're not getting one over here anytime soon.
And we've kind of gone away from pilot season for the most part over here because of the streamers. I think people are kind of falling into your guys' model a lot more for sure. Are you saying that you guys would write, if it was a 6-episode season, you'd write all 6 episodes before you started filming? That's generally the practice?
Yeah, I think so. Just because once you've started filming and it's just you're really going to struggle to write during the actual filming because we'll probably film all 6 in 6 weeks, in a row. We don't, when we filmed 8 Bluestone episodes, I think we did have a kind of a 1-week hiatus, and there was still some work to be done on some of the scripts. So we weren't just supervising the recording. We were still, show 7's still not right. We need to fix that. And here's some other bits. And, we had a read through, we've had a few extra read throughs for this and that. Oh, we've got to do the Christmas one and it's still not quite right. And so there's tweaking, but you've got to have pretty much done it. If you're only recording 6, there's no real excuses for not having at least 5 of them done, is there?
Yeah, over here it's a little different. I mean, obviously, like I was saying, everything's changing with the streamers. But broadcast was they would get ahead of the game. So broadcast, because they're doing the 22 episodes, right?
Yeah.
So they would get ahead of the game, and then what I've been told is that they would pretty much have the season broke. Well, sitcoms a little differently. If it was an hour-long drama, they'd pretty much kind of have most of the season broken down, but only, they'll start shooting and they've only got episode 8 or 9 written.
Yeah.
And so by the time they catch up and there's famous stories about David Milch, they're filming NYPD Blue and he's literally upstairs, they're downstairs filming and he's upstairs writing pages while the crew is waiting for him for pages. And he comes down and gives them the pages so that the actors can take it and shoot it like that. That's actually a better process here. Sounds very different, but with streaming, for sure, there's been a lot more. They're able to kind of write everything and get it all done before they start.
But if you've got 10 people in a room, then you can just start shooting the ones that you've got. And the process, and your showrunner normally has a kind of a number 2 who'll run the room, and so the scripts will keep coming, and your crew's probably bigger. You might have 2 units, all that kind of stuff. Whereas we're just making we're making the show for less over here. So the budget for my per episode for my Bluestone show was, I don't know, £300,000, maybe 280. Per episode, and that was a bit cheaper because we were doing 8 of them. Whereas you're spending that just on the talent, on the cast.
Were you on a soundstage or were you on location?
So we were on location for the whole series. Whole series was shot on location. But yeah, studio sitcoms are more expensive again, so they tend to come in more than that. But but you're rehearsing somewhere else, and there are ways of making all these things work. And the most annoying thing about comedy is that the more expensive it is, the less funny it tends to be.
That's right.
There's really super expensive Hollywood comedy movies. They're just not as funny as Spinal Tap. And Spinal Tap was made for nothing, Yeah. And the writers of Spinal Tap have still not received any more money, I believe. That's still a long run. It's owned by some holding company in France, and they've never seen a bean since they wrote the movie.
So is it true? At some point I read that you guys generally do 3 seasons, and you don't typically do more than 3 seasons on average, most shows. And I read somewhere that had something to do with Faulty Towers. Is there any truth to that?
There is something in that, actually. Yeah, Faulty Towers only ran for 2 seasons, and it's a very highly acclaimed show. John Cleese's, hotel sitcom, all about class, and it's very funny and very silly. And yeah, he wrote a series in 1975 and a series in 1979 with his then wife Connie Booth, and they kind of got divorced. So he wasn't really minded to write a 3rd season. And he's a Python. He doesn't have to write any more episodes of a sitcom than he wants to. And he went off and made A Fish Called Wanda and a whole lot of, what I mean? I love Fish Called Wanda. I don't know why I like that movie so much. Guilty pleasure. There we go. I knew I'd come up. And then there was another show called The Young Ones, I think, which was a really anarchic, silly, strange punk kind of sitcom, and that ran for 2 series. And so then, people just tend to think, oh, if I just do 12 episodes of this, if I do 2 series of 6, and then it's perfect, and then I won't, because also, as I say, there's not that much money in it. So the idea that you wouldn't just keep doing it because this way you're going to be able to buy another house, it's just like, oh, I want to do a 3rd series of this. Can I think of something else to do? There's just very little pressure on you to keep doing it. And I guess previously there was just a chance that you might be able to do something else, that you'd get another show on TV and it wouldn't be that hard. But now there are so many people trying to do it. Mm-hmm. I always say, look, just do your show till they tell you to stop, because you might not get another show on for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So, I think Faulty Towers does have a lot to answer for. There is definitely something in the Faulty Towers theory.
How would you describe, and I'm sure you've been asked this in many other contexts, how would you describe the difference between British humor and American humor?
Yeah, I don't know. Because, as I say, there are so many successful American shows that are successful British shows in Britain. And we like them, and we like them for the same reasons that you like them. So I'm really not sure there's that much difference. I think the British like to feel superior and assume that Americans don't do irony. And you go, well, The Simpsons has just got irony all over it. The Family Guy's got irony all over it. I mean, how much more successful does a show have to be in America to demonstrate that they get irony? So in a way, I struggle with this one. I don't really know, because as I say, you wouldn't expect British people to love Friends as much as they did, because we're not particularly sentimental in that way. And you'd think we go for Seinfeld, but people just lapped up Friends. But there we go. I don't know. That's my honest answer. I just don't know.
What I love about British humor, because I grew up, I was, prior to us recording this and we were talking, British humor was always if I'm using this term correctly, by all means, tell me if I'm not, was always the cheeky humor, right? It was always when I was a teenager and a kid, there was the local PBS station aired old reruns of a 70s show called Are You Being Served, which was like a British, I think they worked at a department store or something. Yeah. And it was, it wasn't it wouldn't be what we call highbrow humor at all. It was just lowbrow. It was a lot of sex jokes, a lot of innuendo, a lot of, things like that. And, would be like the equivalent of our
At the time, maybe the equivalent would be like Three's Company or something, which was a big hit over here. But I'm saying like, it's just curious to me that like, and then of course, there was the Benny Hill and
Yeah.
it was right. And so, and of course, Monty Python and everything. So everything was this kind of cheeky, irreverent. And for me, like in the 80s, things were a little softer here. It was Different Strokes. It was Facts of Life. It was Growing Pains. It was Cosby Show. So like, that's how I differentiate, but that's only like a brief period of time. British comedy was also just a lot sillier at the time.
Yeah, I think there's something in that. I mean, I think those shows that I used to watch, the Cosby Show. They used to have that on Channel 4 at 6:00, 6:30. I used to watch that before or after my tea. It was in the same. They put Roseanne in that slot as well, and that always felt a little bit more, had a bit more edge to it. That had a different quality, which I really liked. Although it became pretty sour eventually. It sort of went from having an edge to being a bit sad. But yeah, I think I get the sense that there are a lot of American shows where people were generally happy and learning lessons every week, and there was always. Whereas I think British shows kind of did highlight dysfunction much more, and I don't know why our TV censors and standards of acceptable stuff was prepared to be more risque and more sexual in tone. And actually, as you look back on it, some of it now, you just think, oh man, that's misogynistic. That's inappropriate. I wouldn't want my kids watching that.
Yes.
But yeah, so that there is that kind of, because of, I think it's partly because we had the kind of the Victorian era of what is perceived to be sexual repression, that in the 20th century, we came out of that and just sort of, started making jokes about it. And so, yeah, I think there are lots of cultural, it's so interesting because sitcoms really do show what the nation is like, and what was acceptable then is not acceptable now. And the hero of that age is not the hero of this age. And sometimes you do go back to some real favorites and you go, what is this? This is not how I remember it at all. Yeah, and there are other things you look back on and you just think, wow, this was really interesting. This was really ahead of its time. And at the time, I didn't think this was anything special. And there was a British show called Rising Damp about a landlord who let out his rooms to some students, one of whom was black, and it was a really interesting exploration of racism. And the black student used to play up to a very superior. He used to give off the impression that he had been an African prince, and we got the impression that he was kind of making this up, and that he was messing with this guy who was fascinated by him. And you watch it now and you think, oh my goodness, it's a 70s show. It's going to be a bit racist. And you watch it and you just think, oh, wow, this is really sophisticated stuff. I don't think we realized at the time how good this was. So it is, they are so evocative of the times, and they really do lay bare what we value and cherish and celebrate as a society. It's sort of yet another reason why I'm so interested in them.
As a comedian, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Not only as a comedian, but as a Christian, how important is it, if at all, for us to separate the art from the artist? So, for instance, and this is in the context of maybe what people would describe as, over here you hear comments, terminology like cancel culture and things, right? So I bring this up because it made me think of it with the Cosby Show, right? Like. It's hard for a lot of people. So the Cosby Show was the biggest show in the mid to late 80s. It was it drew huge numbers. And I remember as a kid, my whole family watching that show. And it was just so funny. And everybody was talking about the Cosby Show the next day at school because everybody watched it. So everybody was talking about, oh, did you hear when Rudy said this or when Theo said that, whatever. And now it's so hard to go back and I've heard people say it's hard for them to listen to Michael Jackson albums these days. I've heard people say it's hard for them to watch a Woody Allen film these days. And I'm just curious. Your thoughts.
I found Woody Allen pretty creepy to begin with. I tried watching one or two of his movies. I think it was Manhattan. I started watching, and after 20 minutes, I just thought, I don't want to watch this. He's basically cracking onto a teenage girl. Oh man, wow. Critics rate this movie. Well, there you go. So anyway,
what are your thoughts on the idea of separating the art from the artist? Can you appreciate Michael Jackson's music? Can you appreciate Bill Cosby's his old classic records? I remember as a kid, my parents would play his famous Noah's Ark bit. It was one of the funniest. It was one of the funniest comedy bits I'd ever heard. Was Bill Cosby being Noah talking to God? It was one of the funniest things I'd ever heard. I'm just curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, to be honest, I think writers above all are quite good at separating stuff out. And I'm aware that other people find that a lot harder. So although lots of writers may want to sound principled and frequently are principled and take a stand, in a writer's room, privately behind closed doors, we say some pretty terrible things. And we know that it's a safe place because everybody understands that you're sort of messing around with words. And, how would it be if, so they can be pretty grotesque places. And I to be honest, I'm kind of fine with that. And sometimes I might say things that I think, I shouldn't have said that. But other times I just think, yeah, everyone in this room gets it. The rules are different here. I think Christians often long for, we love rules because many of us are Pharisees at heart. What words can I use and what words can I not use? I don't care about the context. I want a list of rules. It's like, okay, the rule keepers and the rule makers were the guys who killed Jesus. So just be careful if you want rules that you're not being more holy than Jesus, because that doesn't end well. So don't do that. But equally, to say that doesn't matter what you do or say is obviously nonsense. Of course it does. So, and actually, so I wrote a book called The Sacred Art of Joking, where I talk an awful lot about the ethics of comedy. Firstly, how jokes work, but also how it goes wrong, especially in the realm of religion. And so we're often not very sophisticated in the way that we do approach our comedy, and we do want hard and fast rules. And I don't think we're ever really going to find them. So in a way, it's up to you. If you can't watch The Cosby Show, I think that's fine. I'd understand that. The other day, I was just thinking, I'd love for my kids to watch something. They watched a bit of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They're a bit bored of that because we happen to have, I think that's on Disney Plus. Wouldn't it be great if like The Cosby Show was on? I remember growing up with the Huxtable family and that was great. Yeah, that's not going to be on anymore, is it? Oh, okay. Well, my kids don't know and they don't care, and I would like for something for them to watch. Now, the thing I think where we're in trouble is when we as Christians or individuals require other people to feel the same way about things that we feel. And unfortunately, I don't think we get to do that. So we get to respectfully disagree with each other and our scruples and our consciences. And there's plenty of scripture on that subject. Towards the back end of Romans, Paul writes on, some of you won't eat meat sacrificed to idols, and some are free, and some of you observe these days and some of you don't. And can you just get on? To summarize what Paul was kind of driving at.
Very similar to your Aristotle summary.
Yeah. No, I've got all of these quotes at my fingertips. What an erudite man I'm turning out to be. But so I think we have room to disagree on this. And therefore, I do worry that we're being told ahead of time exactly how we should feel about everything. And I'm not a particularly charismatic guy. So charismatic with a big C, Christian charismatic, in the sense of I'm not particularly, I'm always a bit suspicious of my feelings. My feelings are not reliable, but facts. Christ rise from the dead. Christ is risen. He is in heaven. He will return. These are all facts. It doesn't really matter how I feel about them. They're all facts. So going back to what we were saying before. So don't worry. Christ died on the cross for my sins. There is nothing that I can do about that to change that. So those are the things that I focus on. But a lot of comedy is you don't get to laugh at that, you react. And I think that's why comedy is so hard to handle, is because when you laugh at a joke, you betray something about yourself. You can't take it back. If you laugh at a mean joke, then people will go, wow, I think differently about you. Yeah, they're not as nice as they appear to be. Well, that's true of all of us.
Yep.
Our hearts are all pretty dark.
Yep.
So I think that's why comedy particularly lays us bare in that sense, is because our reaction to a joke is visceral. It's emotional, it's instinctive, and we struggle to hide that, like we managed to hide the rest of our lives. So I think that's why comedy is a particularly difficult issue. But don't be a jerk. You may be free to say what you want, and you may be free to crack a joke. But what would you make a joke in front of this person in that situation? Well, and the show that I did in Afghanistan had IEDs, had bombs going off, and there'd be some people who wouldn't be able to watch that because they know someone in that situation, and it's not. And so I would say you're probably not going to want to watch this. But actually, what you find is people who do know, people who've been in that situation, relatives and friends of people who have served in Afghanistan, they said, "Oh, I found that show so cathartic. It really showed me the world that my brother was living in. It really showed why my son wanted to go." And actually just seeing people deal with grief and all that kind of stuff in a comedy context. Because for soldiers, especially British soldiers, it's just jokes all of the time. They just take the rip out of each other all of the time. They think the world of each other. They punch each other. They live together. They eat and breathe and sleep together. So you just can't predict what people's reactions are going to be. So I'm always a bit wary about trying to predict ahead of time. So if you can't watch a show because you don't like the person who wrote it, okay, I might feel differently. You don't really get to judge me because I feel differently about it. But maybe I've made an error of judgment. So maybe you do. It's complicated, isn't it?
I love it. The last thing I wanted to, and this, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I am so grateful to you.
It's a pleasure.
The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is kind of circle back to that, my first introduction to you. And you have this really interesting kind of perspective on, and you've written extensively about this. I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of a unpacking, if you can, on this idea of the gospel-centric nature of sitcoms themselves. What does that mean, and why should that matter to us?
I think movies are very exciting, but we don't live in movies, really. We live in sitcoms. And I think in a way, the sitcom is the most true to life because of the hardness of the human heart. We are very, very slow to change. And so how someone's going to react to something. When the phone rings and you see who's calling you, oh, I know what this is going to be about. You know what I mean? This is like and then you answer the phone and they say exactly what you thought they were. Unbelievable. I cannot believe they just, we live in sitcoms because if people do change, they change really, really slowly. Sometimes they change fast through the power of the gospel. And that is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But even the Spirit tends to hang around and take his time over transforming us into the likeness of his Son. And so many of us wish that he would, step on the gas there, and raise our game. He doesn't need to raise his game. He needs to raise our game. So in a way, I like how true to life situation comedies are, but also in sitcoms are intensely moral. So they're not. So I think they're Christian, and I think they're Christian because I think the world is Christian because everything was made through Christ. So whether you think it's Christian or not, well, okay, it is. So stories have resonance because they reflect the gospel. They reflect God's story in some way. And therefore, we know that sins will be revealed. We know that sins will be punished. We know that they will be at the end, but that they are now. So your sins will find you out. So in a sitcom, if somebody tells a lie in the first 90 seconds, that's going to go badly for them. And we need it to go badly for them because we know in our hearts that lying is bad and it has consequences. So that lie is going to require a bigger lie and then a bigger lie. And then there'll need to be a confrontation and then there'll need to be something else. Somebody who is proud, they are going to be humbled. Somebody who has stolen something, that is going to be detected. Murder mysteries, funny murder mysteries, are all based on Who's the bad guy? Can we find them? We need justice. We need that. And so we get it with murder mysteries. And we all know in our heart of hearts, if this went to trial, that's not going to stand up and that person's going to walk free. You know, it's just like that. That's how these things go. We don't care about that. We don't show that bit. We just show, there we go. They're having their head put down as they're put into the police car. Yep. We've got the missing piece of evidence that's definitely going to convict them. We need to see that. And in comedy, you know, we have that comic release as we see justice is done in some way. And our hero succeeds and fails at the same time somehow. They never really succeed, but they also never truly fail. There's always some bittersweet resolution. And it's kind of see you next week. And we'll do the same thing all over again. And I just think that is because we live in a profoundly moral universe. And therefore, I think there's lots of comedy that doesn't seem very funny because nothing seems to matter. And fundamentally, if stuff is funny, there is a through line, there is a meaning to it, there is a story to it, there is a morality to it. So I don't care if someone says they're an existentialist. If they write a comedy and it's funny, it's not going to be an existentialist comedy. It can't be. It just can't. You can't write a nihilistic comedy because it doesn't make any sense, because nothing matters. It might be funny in places, and it might be funny because it's unlike every other sitcom. It's the first nihilistic sitcom. It's all the jokes that they're not doing, you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's going to wear thin after a little while. Somebody was telling me that Rick and Morty do this a fair amount. They sort of deconstruct the format, but they're not really, are they? Every story has meaning. Everything has a beginning and a middle and an end. So that's why I love sitcoms profoundly, because I just think they are a good description of life. And that's why I hope to keep writing them. I just think, although I do lots of other things, I write books and teach, and I'm a member of the General Synod of the Church of England, and raise my kids and all that kind of stuff, and teaching them Latin and trying to teach myself New Testament Greek. I just keep coming back to sitcoms and how much I love them. And I think that's why. I think that's because that's how God has made the universe. Life is a sitcom. So, you know, and if you don't find yourself funny, then I don't have anything for you. It's going to be painful.
I love it. This has been
long. Good luck with the edit.
I might just let it roll. I don't know. It's been so good. You were such a joy to meet, and it's just been such a privilege and honor to spend time with you. And it's everything I had hoped for. I just appreciate all of your wisdom and insight, and don't quit your day job. That's what I
Great. Thank you very much.
If it's okay with you, I like to close all of our podcasts by saying a prayer for our guests. That'd be okay with you?
I'd love that. Thank you.
Yeah, let's pray. Heavenly Father, just want to pause and thank you for James Cary. Thank you for his wit. Thank you for his humility. Thank you for his wisdom. Thank you for just his acknowledgement of his need for you, and all the goodness that you have brought to his life. God, I want to thank you for James, and just thank you for this time. Thank you for the chance for us to be able to connect and talk. And God, I just pray right now just for a blessing upon him, for all of his endeavors, everything he's got going on in his life, especially for his wonderful family, just a blessing upon his wife and kids. And I pray, God, that you would protect their family, watch over them, bind them closely in you. God, I pray that you would provide opportunities for James to not only write really funny stuff, but to be a blessing and benefit to those around him while he does it. And thank you for just the testimony and the life that he lives, and the light and the grace that he lives his life in there in England. And we just thank you for technology and the opportunity to be able to have such a great conversation in such a long distance. And we thank you for this. And we pray this in Jesus' name, and your promises we stand. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Act One podcast. Celebrating over 20 years as the premier training program for Christians in Hollywood, Act One is a Christian community of entertainment industry professionals who train and equip storytellers to create works of truth, goodness, and beauty. The Act One program is a division of Master Media International. To financially support the mission of Act One, or to learn more about our programs, visit us online at actoneprogram.com. And to learn more about the work of Master Media, go to mastermedia.com.